This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
With no fees or minimums on checking and savings accounts, and an app that lets you bank anytime, anywhere, choosing Capital One is like the easiest decision in the history of decisions. That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet? Terms apply. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Order.
Hello, I'm Sean Curran, and this is the Today in Parliament podcast from BBC Radio 4 for Thursday, the 9th of September, when the government was accused of trying to rush its plans for a tax rise through Parliament.
The Prime Minister bounced his cabinet into accepting his so-called social care plan, and yesterday bounced Parliament into accepting it by calling a vote.
There are calls for urgent action to tackle a serious shortage of haulage drivers.
Without real action, he will be left standing alone as a Transport Secretary who stole Christmas.
And there's criticism over continuing problems with one of the Army's new generation of armoured fighting vehicles.
And presiding over this steaming heap of institutional incompetence is the Minister.
The Prime Minister had a comfortable majority on Wednesday night when MPs voted on his proposals to tackle problems in the NHS and social care. A number of Conservatives abstained, but only 5 Tories joined the opposition in voting against an increase in national insurance contributions. The leader of the Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg, has now announced that the bill implementing the £12 billion tax rise will go through all of its Commons stages next Tuesday. His Labour opposite number, Thangam Debonair, said Boris Johnson had bounced the Cabinet and Parliament into accepting his plans.
Why the urgency for a plan that doesn't even come into effect until next year? Is it because the Prime Minister's so-called plan is nothing more than a Tory tax rise? The third Tory tax rise on working families in recent months. A hat trick of broken Tory manifesto promises, and it's not a plan. Nothing on workforce, nothing on how to help people stay in their own homes, which is what people prefer. No vision for what social care should be. The Prime Minister knows this would never get through Parliament unless they rush it through.
Jacob Rees-Mogg said it was ridiculous to suggest that MPs had been bounced.
We are having a 7-clause bill, including the clauses on commencement and so on, which will have had, including the debate yesterday, more than an hour per clause. If we did an hour per clause on every bill, we would never have time to discuss all the bills that we have going through. So it's being done in a completely proper and sensible way and is respectful of the procedures within this House.
Well, earlier the Prime Minister had been accused of breaking a promise he made in Parliament on Monday when he said MPs who'd emailed the government on behalf of people trying to leave Afghanistan and get to the UK would get a reply by the end of that day. A Foreign Office Minister, James Cleverly, said his department was urgently working through the correspondence.
Including the hundreds of letters we received during the operation from MPs and peers, many of which contained multiple cases. Over 100 additional staff have been assigned to work through the caseload. Where the FCDO has received cases which are dealt with by the MOD under the ARAP scheme or the Home Office under the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme, we will pass those cases to the relevant department. This will be completed within a week, that is by the 16th of September, and those MPs concerned will be informed as to the government department that will be assessing the cases.
ARAP, or the Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy, is the scheme designed to help Afghan interpreters and other people who worked with the UK. The Minister had come to the Commons after Labour's Chris Bryant asked an urgent question. He said he'd never heard as many upsetting stories in his 20 years in Parliament as in the last few weeks.
Torture, rape, threats, constant reprisals, these are the reality for many people who stood by us in our hour of need.
He said the Prime Minister had promised that every email from an MP would get a reply by the close of play on Monday.
So far, all we have had is a circular, a dear colleague letter, not even handwritten, from one of the ministers, as referred to by the Minister just now. No answer to the 143 individual cases, 142, because one was murdered the other day.
The The Conservative chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Tom Tugendhat, said people who had stood by the UK needed to get answers quickly.
The risk to these people is growing by the day. The biometric data that was left behind by the United States is increasingly being used against them to track them and find them, and people are taking risk in going to the border that they then have to turn back from when they find out that borders are closed or their papers are no good. So giving information early is not just a kindness or a courtesy, it is life-saving.
James Cleverly said the government had received 200,000 emails.
It is just not possible to open, analyse and respond to 200,000 emails in the same timescale that we would normally be able to do. The commitment made by my Right Honourable friend the Foreign Secretary and my Right Honourable friend the Prime Minister was discharged. Every single MP received a response so they could know that their email had been received and had been open and would be worked upon.
The SNP's Alan Smith said he had an automated response for anyone who emailed him.
So I could say hand on heart that anybody who gets in touch with me gets a response within seconds. But for me to suggest that that is a substantive response that actually answers the question would surely be misleading Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Which is why I've never made that point. So I have to say to the Minister that I've canvassed opinion across the SNP group, and as at 5 o'clock last night, we have 153 outstanding cases of individuals within Afghanistan needing help. And they've not had a proper response.
At the end of the exchanges, the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, said he was very concerned that the Foreign Office wasn't replying to correspondence from MPs promptly. Now, the government's been accused of doing nothing to tackle the UK's shortage of lorry drivers. Labour said unless ministers acted now, they'd be in danger of stealing Christmas, leaving shelves empty. Alicia McCarthy reports.
One fast food firm ran out of milkshakes, a chicken chain closed 50 restaurants, and a well-known pub group ran out of beer. Recent headlines all attributed to a shortage of heavy goods drivers. Labour's Shadow Transport Secretary Jim McMahon reckoned this was just one of the summer's problems where ministers had shown an abject failure of duty.
We've seen high-profile examples where businesses have been impacted by supply chain disruption and suppliers with stock they just could not get out the door. Yet ministers seem to do nothing.
He wanted a road freight recovery plan and a task force to fix the long-standing problems in the HGV industry. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, insisted his department was acting, for example, introducing a temporary relaxation of drivers' hours and...
We're now testing 50% more drivers than we did before the pandemic. So yes, we have been acting, but we're going to go further.
And he said that included making some changes that were only possible because the UK was no longer in the EU. Jim McMahon didn't reckon that would fix it, telling MPs there were 90,000 driver vacancies.
Without real action, he will be left standing alone as a Transport Secretary who stole Christmas, leaving shelves empty, gifts absent from under the tree, and restaurants and bars without the stock they need to trade.
The SNP's Alison Thewlis reckoned she knew why there weren't enough drivers.
Despite all the government's protestations to the contrary, Brexit and the end of freedom of movement are the lead causes of the current driver shortage in the UK. Yeah. So will he listen to the Road Haulage Association when they say that they don't have a cat's chance of solving the problem unless they have access to temporary labour in the short term?
But Grant Shapps dismissed the idea that Brexit was to blame.
In the US, for example, they're hiring drivers from South Africa. In Poland, for example, their shortage is 123,000. In Germany, 45 to 60,000. So to say that this is just an issue of Brexit is completely untrue. What it is about, Mr. Speaker, is coronavirus.
The SNP's transport spokesperson, Gavin Newlands, said the government seemed finally to understand the scale of the problem and was rattled by it. He had a suggestion.
Can you not convince the Home Office to put HGV drivers on the shortage occupation list for a temporary period? This isn't just about cancelling Christmas. Shelves lie empty right now.
Grant Shapps repeated there was a big increase in driver testing. As to Gavin Newlands' question...
I hear his call for more immigration to resolve the problem. We do have to stand on our own 2 feet as the United Kingdom. There are a lot of people coming off furlough, and I look forward to those people getting jobs.
The session of questions had started with the Minister pointing out that it was World Electric Vehicle Day, and MPs were told that 1 in 6 new cars now has a plug. A Conservative, Felicity Buchan, welcomed the latest plan for greener transport, particularly a proposal that
all new homes and offices will be required to have electric vehicle charging points.
Something she'd been campaigning for. The Minister, Rachel Maclean, promised that idea would be put into action soon.
And we intend to lay legislation later this year. We also confirmed our intention to mandate that home and workplace electric vehicle chargers must be capable of smart charging,
which is an energy-efficient way of charging vehicles. But the SNP's Alan Brown wondered if the government was going to get anywhere near one estimate he'd seen of just how many plug-in points would be needed.
700 new charge points need to be installed every single day. Can the Secretary advise how many are currently getting installed and when they're ever going to reach such a target of 700 per day?
Rachel Maclean didn't answer that directly, instead telling him,
we are installing 500 charge points every month at the moment across the country, and we will have by 2023 we'll have 6 rapid chargers in every motorway service station across the country.
And she said the government would publish its infrastructure strategy soon, setting out how it would meet its charging point target.
Alicia McCarthy. The sister of the murdered MP Jo Cox has made her first or maiden speech in the Commons. Kim Leadbeater was elected in July to the constituency of Batley and Spen, the seat her sister represented. Kim Leadbeater said it was an honour and privilege to be the MP for the area where she was born and bred.
Following the result of the by-election on the 1st of July, after several weeks of running round the streets of the area where I live, asking people to put their faith in me, with not enough sleep and far too much chocolate and caffeine, I quickly found myself on a train to Hogwarts. Sorry, I mean Westminster. But nobody gave me a book of spells or taught me how to play Quidditch. But here I am.
She said she was sure every new MP felt the same mixture of pride and responsibility that she was feeling.
But as the House does my family the great honour of paying tribute to my sister, I hope members will understand that I mean no disrespect to this place when I say that I would give literally anything not to be standing here today in her place.
She paid tribute to the best big sister anyone could ask for and reflected that the most often quoted line from Jo's maiden speech, that we are far more united and have far more in common than that which divides us, was as true today as when she said it in 2015. And she concluded,
if I can be half the MP my sister was, then it will be a huge privilege to get on with the job of representing the wonderful people of Batley and Spen. Thank you.
Can I just say, we're all moved. We'll always think of your sister. And I know that you're going to be a great member of Parliament.
The Speaker of the Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, there. The Labour MP, Stephen Kinnock, was close to tears as he reflected on his 20-year friendship with Jo Cox, sharing an office after she'd been elected.
I'm very grateful to have the opportunity as well to contribute to this debate. I had the privilege of knowing Jo. I didn't realise this would happen so quickly.
He said from the deep darkness of her death must now come what he called the shining light of her legacy. And the Conservative, Tracy Crouch, paid tribute to Jo Cox for her success in the setting up of a cross-party loneliness commission.
I was the world's first loneliness minister, and curiosity in this brief reached all four corners of the globe. But this is what Jo did. She took an issue that others had cast a glance at and then catapulted it into the stratosphere.
Tracy Crouch. You're listening to Today in Parliament with me, Sean Curran. Still to come, a top footballer explains the impact of racist abuse on his family.
I have to sit there and have breakfast with my kids and explain to them what the monkey emoji means in that context, what a banana means.
The government has been accused of a 5-star shambles over the controversial Ajax armoured vehicle programme. More than 300 soldiers are being assessed for hearing loss after being exposed to noise in the vehicles. Mandy Baker reports.
There was some ironic laughter among MPs when the Defence Minister Jeremy Quinn described the Ajax programme as troubled. 7 years ago, 589 of the armoured fighting vehicles were ordered from a company called General Dynamics at a cost of £5.5 billion. But major design flaws have been identified, including excessive noise and vibration. Jeremy Quinn said he'd be extending the hearing test programme for soldiers.
I will update the House on the number of personnel affected by noise and vibration in due course, including if any trends become apparent once the data has been analysed. I know this House will, as I am, be absolutely determined that we provide the appropriate testing and care to our service personnel and indeed veterans.
Labour's Shadow Defence Secretary John Healey felt things had gone from bad to worse. He read out the conclusions of the government's Major Projects Authority.
Successful delivery, and I quote Mr Deputy Speaker, appears to be unachievable. This is a programme that has cost £3.5 billion to date, delivered just 14 vehicles, and is set to be completed a decade late.
But, Jeremy Quinn explained, unachievable didn't mean unachievable. It meant unachievable without the risks and problems being addressed. But that didn't reassure Labour's Nick Smith, whose South Wales constituency is close to the General Dynamics plant where the vehicles are assembled.
This is a five-star shambles. The government is guilty of negligence. This isn't good enough when service personnel have been put at risk. There could be a massive waste of money, and now people's livelihoods may be hanging in the balance.
Much of the debate was taken up with quite involved questions about detailed defence matters littered with acronyms. But a Conservative, Sir Desmond Swain, produced an admirably succinct exchange.
If a remedy is identified, where will the bill for that land?
Minister. With General Dynamics.
Another Conservative, Jane Stevenson, said she was really disturbed by the health implications of the noise and vibration issues.
Could he guarantee that no more risk will be given and no service person will be put into the Ajax until these health and safety issues have been fully resolved?
Jeremy Quinn said he could reassure her about that. While several MPs sympathised with the Minister, others, like Labour's Emma Lewell-Buck, were scathing.
The Minister will recall in July's Defence Select Committee dodging any responsibility for the failings in this programme, and a lessons learned review was then promised over the summer. Where is it?
Jeremy Quinn said he was looking at all aspects of the Ajax programme.
On the conclusion of the health and safety report, its finalisation and publication, I will be saying what our next steps were, not just in relation to health and safety, but across the project as a whole.
But the strongest criticism came from the Conservative former Defence Minister Mark Francois. He said that not one of the top 36 major defence programmes was successfully on track.
And presiding over this steaming heap of institutional incompetence is the Minister. You're losing 36-0 on behalf of the British taxpayer, and it might be nice if you weren't laughing about it. This is massive amounts of taxpayers' money. You're 36-0 down, you've got a broken system, and you're in total denial. What are you doing about it?
The Minister said he was smiling at the sporting analogy, which he didn't think was appropriate. But he said Mark Francois was right about the defence projects.
I would, in fairness, tell the House that if you look at every major country acquiring major defence assets, these are complex and difficult programmes.
He said he wanted Ajax to work, and for that to happen, there must be fundamental resolution of the issues.
Mandy Baker. 3 Conservatives have been suspended from the Commons for a day after they were found to have broken the Code of Conduct for MPs. Natalie Elphicke, Sir Roger Gale and Theresa Villiers won't be able to attend Friday's sitting of the Commons. They'd written to senior judges in relation to the case of Charlie Elphicke, a former MP who was convicted of sex offences. 5 Conservatives wrote letters raising concerns that a judge was considering publishing character references that had been given for Mr Elphicke. In July, 2 MPs, Adam Holloway and Bob Stewart, apologised. The Conservative Deputy Chief Whip, Stuart Andrew, said the situation was regrettable.
The matter has been investigated by the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards and now reported on by the Committee on Standards. I thank the Commissioner and the Standards Committee for producing this report. This motion endorses the recommendations of the committee and proposes that the Honourable Member for Dover, the Right Honourable Member for North Thanet and the Right Honourable Member for Barnet be suspended from the service of the House for one sitting day. I commend this motion to the House.
The shadow leader of the Commons, Thangam Debonair, supported the decision but criticised the day chosen for the suspensions.
There is no previous precedent for members to be suspended on a Friday, and given that many members, including the members concerned, were unlikely to be here anyway, it's not like it's an inconvenience. I think if the government believed that to try and unduly influence the judiciary and bring the reputation of Parliament into disrepute, it would have been more fitting for the government to decide that suspension fall on a normal sitting day.
Thangam Debonair. Over in the Lords, members were considering standards in public life. During the debate, one Labour peer, Lord Putnam, called on the Prime Minister to quit.
I beg those many, many decent Conservative peers and members of another House with a concern for the principles of parliamentary democracy to do what they know sooner or later they have to do. Muster the courage to say to the Prime Minister, in God's name, go. Go before you destroy the last sliver of self-respect our party can call its own.
Lord Young, a Conservative former minister, said while there was no room for complacency, standards in public life in the UK were amongst the highest in the world.
Ex-President Trump was impeached twice, and he and his company face a range of civil and criminal actions. And in 2018, the ex-president of Brazil, Lula da Silva, was the front runner for the presidency, even though he was in jail, serving a 12-year corruption sentence. So yes, my lords, we can do better, but we are not bottom of the class.
A Liberal Democrat, Lord Wallace of Saltaire, wanted action.
The Prime Minister likes to speak about the UK as a beacon of democracy for the world. It is the Minister's responsibility to ensure that that beacon does not get dimmer.
The Cabinet Office Minister, Lord True, said it was a disservice to the vast bulk of those working in public service to say that standards had dropped.
I do differ with some on the idea that we have now descended into an age of rust and that standards now are uniquely poor or corrupt. I don't believe that's true.
The Cabinet Office Minister, Lord True. Now, the former England footballer Rio Ferdinand has warned a group of MPs and peers that abuse online is normalising racist behaviour with no repercussions for those behind it. He said he had had to explain to his children why people used offensive emojis. David Cornock reports.
Rio Ferdinand enjoyed a glittering career with Manchester United and England. He retired from playing 8 years ago, but working as a pundit is still the target of racist abuse online.
It baffles me, it's disheartening. In the 70s and 80s it was something that was a lot more common. We went through a period where maybe it was under the carpet or was behind the scenes a little bit more, but now you can see the data is telling us that it's here and it's back.
He complained that many of the racist comments were posted anonymously.
You can go to a game, and if you threw a banana on a pitch, there'll be repercussions. But online, you can post a banana, you can type and post a banana to a black player or a black person with racist connotations behind it, and be fine. And you're not going to get punished, there's no repercussions. How is that right?
Rio Ferdinand was giving evidence to a committee of MPs and peers who are looking at the government's proposed new law to regulate online safety. Edleen John from the Football Association said the FA had been talking to social media organisations for years.
And what we consistently receive are platitudes. We get promises of things that are going to be addressed. We get told that, of course, racism, discrimination of any kind is a priority. And actually what we are seeing is that online abuse is a golden goose for social media organisations.
She said the FA had met significant resistance to calls to protect people from online abuse. Sanjay Bantari from the anti-racism charity Kick It Out said racism wasn't the only problem.
And what we actually see is the sort of four horsemen of the apocalypse of hate. And so we see hate based on race, on gender and sexual orientation, on disability and on religion.
He suggested the bosses of social media companies were sometimes reluctant to act.
My experience is that we'll have conversations in London and it will be London says, oh, that's interesting, maybe, and then California says no. And so I'm not sure whether I'm stuck in Groundhog Day or Dante's Inferno, but either way, it's a deeply unpleasant experience.
The Conservative Damien Collins, who chairs the committee, wanted to know more about the consequences of online abuse.
Rio Ferdinand, are you concerned that the prevalence of this speech, this content, this dehumanising language on social media is giving licence to racists, effectively, to speak out, to seek other people of similar opinions and to act in a concerted way to deliberately target and dehumanise sports stars like footballers?
100% I agree with that. I think it's normalising racist behaviour. It's normalising racist language.
He described the impact checking his phone had on him.
You look on there and there's negative discrimination on there, and that language is there and prominent for you to see. Self-esteem, your mental health is at risk.
And he stressed the impact it had on families.
I've seen members of my family kind of disintegrate at times with situations like this. When it happens, I've seen other sports stars, family members, take it worse than the actual person who's actually receiving this type of language through social media.
On Wednesday, Rio Ferdinand's brother Anton told another group of MPs that a high-profile footballer or member of their family could kill themselves unless social media companies took action. Rio Ferdinand talked about the impact on his own family.
A lot of us have children, and I have to sit there and have breakfast with my kids and explain to them what the monkey emoji means in that context, what a banana means. Dad, why is there a banana under your post? Why is there loads? What's that about?
The online safety bill would place new duties on social media firms to remove harmful content, including racist posts, and give the government new powers to enforce the rules. It would also place a duty of care on platforms, but would still allow anonymous accounts.
David Cornock. MPs returned to Westminster this week after the summer recess. They're no longer allowed to take part in debates or question ministers via video link. And so for the first time since the start of the COVID pandemic, ministers have had to face a busy and noisy Commons chamber. But the SNP's Pete Wishart thought people watching the proceedings would be dumbfounded.
One side of the chamber, nearly everybody with a face mask. On the other side, practically no one. It's as if keeping our workplace and colleagues safe has now become an ideological and political position, that somehow being a Tory MP makes you exempt from contracting and spreading COVID.
The leader of the Commons, Jacob Rees-Mogg, said the government guidance was clear.
It is said specifically in the guidance that you might want to wear one when you are in a crowded space with people you don't know. Patience, listen to the end of the sentence. In a crowded space with people you don't normally meet. We are not in a crowded space with people we don't normally meet. And people are right to make a judgment for themselves as to whether they will wear a face mask or not.
And those comments bring us to our closing headline from Westminster. Ministers were accused of bouncing Parliament into accepting plans for a tax rise to pay for health and social care, after it was confirmed that the Health and Social Care Levy Bill will be fast-tracked through the Commons. I'm Sean Curran. The editor was Simon Jones. The studio manager was Darren Garrett. And that was the Today in Parliament podcast. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed this programme, why not check out the Yesterday in Parliament podcast on BBC Sounds.
Hey, business owner. Did you know that over 4.2 billion people are active on social media now? That means if you want to connect with your customers and find new ones, you need social. Hootsuite is the must-have tool for managing and growing your business on social. You can schedule content, publish posts, and track your success all in one place. Millions of businesses around the world are already using Hootsuite. Now it's your turn. Go to hootsuite.com/30free to start your free trial and get 50% off your first year. That's HOOTSUITE.com/30free for a free 30-day trial and 50% off your first year.
BBC